America, 1920. The temper of the nation had changed. The buildings were higher, the parties were bigger, and the mobs were stronger. American thirst approached hysteria. January 17th, 1920, the day it all changed. The fiber of America was about to be changed by one bold act. Alcohol was now made illegal. In an effort to restrict crime, the United States government ushered in a new era of illicit activities. Centered in the heart of the greatest cities of America, New York and Chicago, organized crime reigned supreme. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution. The manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within, the importation thereof into, or the exportation thereof from, the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof, for beverage purposes, is hereby prohibited.
The public reaction to the introduction of Prohibition was largely mixed. The temperance organizations rejoiced at their victory. Over a century of hard work had paid off for them. The rest of the country, however, was less than pleased. Many saw it as a violation of their freedom, and others simply wanted to keep drinking. Despite their attempts to curb the consumption of alcohol, Prohibition actually increased the consumption of alcoholic beverages. It did not take long for people to begin their protest. The United States police system was unable to cope with a large increase in illicit liquor racketeering. Jails became greatly overcrowded, court queues were never-ending, and officer corruption became massively prevalent in response to the unpopular laws. Organized crime lords took advantage of the swell in demand of alcohol to become wealthy pioneers in the bootlegging industry. In the heart of Chicago, MUN was ready to gain his riches.
If you're not a dock worker, a streetwalker, or a mobster, you don't belong in my city. In the bustling streets of Philadelphia, Jack Diamond was on the prowl.
There ain't never been a bullet made that can kill me.
Prohibition gave birth to the greatest mobster of the decade. He ruled with an iron fist and a bottle of whiskey. Al Capone.
Don't you get the idea that I'm one of these goddamn radicals? Don't you get the idea that I'm knocking this American system? This American system, call it Americanism, call it capitalism. Call it what you will. Gives each and every one of us an opportunity, only if we seize it with both hands and make the best out of it.
The Prohibition was the perfect time for the rise of mayhem, murder, and mobsters. As the public demand for alcohol increased, the mobsters, or rather opportunists, began their reign over the largest cities in America. So, you're Al Capone, self-proclaimed mayor of Chicago. What is it that you do?
I respond to the will of the people. People want to drink. You know that, and I know that. I just act on that. You know, people call it bootlegging. What is bootlegging? I sell liquor, people call it bootlegging. But when they sell liquor on Lakeshore Drive, it's called hospitality. I'm just a businessman.
But what about your reputation? You control your business with violence.
You know, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. And they said back then that you can get far with a gun and a kind word than just a kind word.
Al Capone led the Chicago outfit with its bootlegging and racketeering operations. Nationally renowned for his brutality, Capone had a special way of dealing with those who got in his way. Most notable were his actions towards the MUN gang, whom he had a vicious rivalry with during the St. Valentine's Day massacre. During this massacre, Al Capone's thugs, dressed up as police officers, proceeded to go to the warehouse of Moran's gang. Once they got there, they proceeded to line up the men within the warehouse and shoot them repeatedly in the back.
As the Prohibition dragged on, the 1920s were also defined by new fashion. Automobiles, skyscrapers, entertainment, and political corruption.
The epicenters of the bootlegging business during the Prohibition era were the speakeasies, which are illegally maintained bars that are under the basement of restaurants that often participated in illegally sold alcohol. This is a very popular method of alcohol distribution because it was very simple and it attracted a very large amount of business. However, there was a drawback, and police often targeted these bars and arrested the families that owned them.
These speakeasies were populated by jazz musicians and flappers, as well as those looking to have a good time. Typically run by one of the 5 families of the New York organized crime circuit, these speakeasies were also often involved in violence and hits by rival families. The 5 families consisted of the Lucchese, Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Colombo mafias, and were extremely rich and violent.
The owners of illegal speakeasies are left alone by the police so long as they pay monthly protection payments to the mafia bosses. This is because the mob uses a wide array and network of bribery to make sure that the police are on their side.
Political corruption was rampant throughout the Prohibition era, perpetrated in bribery and assassinations by the mafias which ran the major cities. Al Capone's gang was notorious for its practice of laundering money for the Chicago mayor, and thereby gaining immunity for all illegal activities that it wished to execute in the city. While the mobs ran America's cities, the federal government decided it could not sit idly by, and so the Bureau of Investigations was tasked on the management and prevention of organized crime. With federal intervention in the bootlegging, gambling, and racketeering industry, mob bosses were much more likely to be apprehended and jailed. Not even Al Capone could bribe the feds, and was eventually brought down for tax evasion, toppling the great American gangster once and for all. In the 1920s, amidst the roaring and the jazz, Prohibition was constantly influential in the lives of every American.
It shaped the fashion, culture, and politics of the era and led to a devastating organized crime wave that rippled throughout America.